Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LocoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com.
All right, and we are back, and I'm with Coach Sam.
In person.
Okay. We just did a replay really quick to make sure that like the video went through, and then
I hate myself.
Honestly, it's so hard being on, not just like hearing your voice is one thing. It's horrifying. And then, I don't know how anybody listens to the podcast, my voice is so bad. And then when you watch the video playback, like you realize like weird things that you do, or like little like, I don't know, you just do stuff. And like I often sometimes like if I'm like intently paying attention, I realize that like I put my chin up and I'm just like, and I like continue to like shake my head, but like it looks, in my head I look like I'm just being like this like stoic natural person, but then I'm like
I'll give you a little wink if you start to
just
start winking really fast at you.
All good.
Face.
All right, so if you guys listened to Monday's podcast, you heard about our reasons why you should compete, or some of the positives behind a physique competition. And we wanted to do a part 2, of course, of the dark side of competing, because we support everybody competing if they want to for the right reasons, but we also support having just, being informed.
Absolutely.
And knowing what to expect, because there's nothing worse than, something that is so mentally and physically draining. And it can be a great thing, but it can also really hit you in the face if you're not ready.
And it's something that, like you said in the last podcast, competing has become more mainstream. It's also, I think, in the process become very glamorized as this like thing that if you're in fitness, you should compete. And you're not truly in fitness unless you're competing. And that isn't true, first of all. Like, you can still be a very fit person and not compete. But if we're gonna have more people in the sport, I think that it's important that we know everything that entails before, again, like you said, stepping your foot into something that is a little more intensive on both sides than maybe you realize.
Yes, there can be very high highs with this, and then there can also be very low lows, which we'll get into. But first, let's just touch on some of the, we ended the last podcast with the positives of competing and kind of like the whole atmosphere of the day. And we just want to touch on some of the negatives first before we get into some of the more higher level ideas. Yeah. So first, obviously, cost is one thing that people, rarely consider, or maybe they do, but it does add up. Yeah. Competing is not cheap. I remember when I first started jiu-jitsu, and Rick was like, yeah, I know it can be kind of an expensive sport. And I was like, excuse me? Yeah. And he's like, yeah, you gotta buy the gi. And, and now gis aren't cheap, especially if you get a halfway decent one. And you should probably have a few if you're training multiple times a week. So that adds up, but you have those for a long time. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's kind of it. I'm wearing leggings and shirt and a gi, and then if you end up competing, it's the competition fee, and that's it, right? And then I was like, those competition suits? And he's like, I'm like, you wanna know what's this cost?
How much does the can cost?
So just the day of competing, you're gonna have, for a female, for guys, nothing.
You're fine.
Fuck you guys. But for chicks, you have to wear the Swarovski suit, right? So you're gonna have a completely crystallized suit, which is gonna range. Of course, there's different ones for different budgets, but I would say that probably not gonna get a suit for less than $300, and that's low. Yeah, that's not a lot of crystals. A fully crystal suit is gonna run high hundreds in the thousands, just based on literally the amount of crystals that you have. So that's one thing. Of course, you can wear that multiple times, but that is a big upfront factor. It's going to be the heels, the jewelry, and again, those are kind of like you buy it and that's it. But then every time you do a show, it's hair, makeup, tan. Now you can do all those things yourself as well. If you buy extensions, you buy those once. Yeah. Presuming you don't dye your hair, but you know, you gotta get your hair done, or you gotta get your makeup done, and you know, or you have to learn how to do the makeup, which is the whole thing, right? Like there's just a lot of
and especially
costs.
when you're first competing, like if we're talking about like entering into the sport, it's so much easier to just pay for it than have the added stress of, am I doing this right? Am I like, how do I take care of my own tan? Like that's tough. So
now I will say that is a negative. Tan.
Yeah.
Anybody who's competed knows the tan is quite the disaster. And it's depending on how your skin takes it. Like, so I have the worst tan, like the worst skin tan. Like it just, I'm very fair and I need a lot of coats. Like my body just literally soaks it up. So I'm somebody who needs a lot of tan, and towards the end of my competing career, I finally kind of perfected it. But literally, I probably by the end of it had like 8 coats tanned on. Like I do the hand apply, so it's a little bit thinner, and it works a lot better. But I'm starting base tan, I'm building the color, I'm doing the tops. Like I would have so many tans on here. Like it maybe not 8, but it was a lot. And it's just because, you know, my skin needs that, and it actually worked out, you know, even better. But the tan is a thing. Like the whole day is part of it is very glamorous and fun, but part of it isn't.
Right. And the tan isn't just that, like, I think a lot of people who first see competitors outside of the competing world are like, why are you so orange? You guys look ridiculous. It's not even that you look bad because everyone looks the same. So it's not about that. It's that it's uncomfortable because you have to be so cautious about it smearing it. It feels like you're under like 3 layers of sunscreen all day long. You can't wear deodorant, so you smell like shit, and everyone around you smells like shit. You have to either use a pee funnel or a Dixie cup or something to be careful of not dripping all over yourself, which that's gross.
It's just it's
a lot. It's a whole thing.
You're like babysitting your skin.
You are, and your day can start with a tan at 3 a.m. Yeah. Like they're depending on how big your show is, they will start tanning. Like I think my first show, my second tan was at 4:30, and so I got up, got my tan, and then went back to bed cautiously. Eventually, once it had dried down a little bit, but that's not fun.
Yeah. It is a whole process of the day, and of course it all comes together, and then you feel really great, and then that part becomes the glamorous part, right? Because when the tan and the hair and the makeup, and you put your suit on with the jewelry, like that's where it becomes all fun. But there are just some realities of it. Like this is an expensive day. This is not really a whole glamorous, like a whole of prep is not very glamorous until literally the hour before.
Yeah, and another cost is the actual show itself. Like you're gonna pay entry fee for every class that you're in. So let's say you're over 35 and you want to do open, so you want to compete with everybody. You want to do masters, so you're going to compete with your age group. It's your first show, so you want to do the novice group. You're going to pay a fee for each of those classes, not just to enter the show. So those costs can add up based on what you want to do, and that's something just to be aware of. On top of that, like travel to the show is a thing. Like if you're going to travel, staying at the hotel is a cost, which is fun. But just to wrap up the expenses, like there's a lot that you might not think of. Yeah,
and you can of course, lower the expenses. Stay with a friend who's competing. Obviously wear the same suit. Maybe do your own hair, whatever it is. But at some point, it's still going to be expensive, no matter how discounted you make it. You can make it better. You can fly with points, and you can do all this stuff, of course. But it still does add up, and it's just something to be aware of. It's not necessarily bad. It's just, again,
and not a reason not
reality.
to do it. It's just something that
you have to budget for.
Budget for.
And sometimes there's a lot of people who I want to do all these shows. I'm like, all right, that's fine. You just you have to budget for it. So that's just kind of the show day realities. But what are some of the more pervasive kind of themes? And one thing that always sticks out to me, and that I just want to make very clear to people, is that competing can suck you in and spit you out if you're not ready for it. And we kind of touched on it a little bit in the beginning of the first podcast, but this is a subjective sport. So you are going to be on stage with a panel of judges, and they are judging and critiquing what you look like. That is literally bodybuilding defined.
That's what you signed up for.
That is what you signed up for. Unfortunately, some people are not ready for that kind of judgment, or they don't think that they're going to maybe take it as harshly as they do, because oftentimes, you know, it's the judges are being objective with you, but you take it really personally, like it's like this attack on your self-worth, like, oh, I wasn't lean enough, like I did a terrible job, it's all my fault. It's like, no, they were just giving you feedback, and sometimes it's just that the other person looked different than you and they just chose that person, but when you're looking at it on a subjective scale, it feels like, well, why are they better than me? Like, what did I do wrong? And again, if you're used to more traditional sports, okay, I could have run faster, I could have jumped higher, I could have lifted more, I could have practiced harder. Like, this isn't always, that's not how it works. It's not, oh, I missed a lifting session. Like, it's not why somebody else won. And the other thing, people, this should be so obvious, but physique sports are based on genetics. Some people, like the people who have the best genetics for bodybuilding are typically going to succeed. Now, you can have great genetics and a shit work ethic and you're not going to go very far. But if you put good genetics with a good work ethic together, it's really, really hard to beat. And it's not, again, a knock on you, but if somebody say in the division that you're competing in, say it's, I don't know, men's physique. I'm just thinking of shoulders. Broad, or even figure, right? Broad shoulders, you know, broad back, tiny waist. You have narrow shoulders and a wide waist. You can train all you want. But if somebody comes out there and they have wide cap shoulders and a small waist, it's game over. It's not that you didn't try. It's not that you look light years better than you used to look. Like, it just, you know, objectively bodybuilding standard wise. But that person just showed up that day, and that's just, you know, you have to be prepared for that. You can also be prepared for, hey, I'm the best person here today and I won. Like, that's great. But it's such a hard thing, because I always try to tell people, like, you have to train to win. Like, you have to train like you're going to win the show. But if you don't, you can't let that, like, take the rug out from under you and like completely crumble your life, because I've seen that. And then that's when people basically, the placings keep, like, oh, I didn't get it this time, so maybe I'll do it another show, and I'll do another one, and oh, well, I'll try one more time. And that's where it gets really, really dicey. And that, I want to lead into, like, that story that you said earlier, like with your competing experience. You know, like, we could have gone down, you know, there was kind of like that fork in the road, you know.
Because I did well. Like, I showed up well, and I won both my shows. Like, won my novice class, got third in open, and then I won my class in my second show, and so I nationally qualified. And so there was a window of time where I could have competed. And actually going into 2020, like right after the show, I was kind of like, should I keep going or should I not? But I really didn't feel like going forward, and you were like fully supportive with me and didn't push me to do something I wasn't wanting to do, which you could have had you wanted me to. And same thing this year. I didn't know if I wanted to try to get pregnant yet, or if I wanted to take this opportunity to go on a national stage. And we actually talked it out, and we looked at the realities, and like, reality was, like, at least in my eyes, I wasn't competitive enough yet to put in that time to step on stage. Thank God I didn't, because then COVID happened, whatever, I'm pregnant, like, it all worked out the way it was supposed to. But had I had a coach who wanted my money, because you probably would have gotten, I would have been coaching with you longer, who wanted to just have athletes on stage, you could have easily told me, like, no, you're fine, you can do this, you're gonna be great.
Yeah, just do one more show.
Just do one more show. And I was not there.
Now, if, and that is the hard part as a coach, right? Because I'm a coach and I'm also an athlete, right? I don't actively compete anymore, but I competed for many years. So I understand that. And there have been forks in the road for me as far as being a competitor, where I had to choose, maybe this isn't the best decision, but I'm going to push forward. And it ended up, you know, sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. And as a competitor, sometimes I think you have to kind of put your head down and sometimes make those tough choices, but it has to feel right. You know, you have to want to do it, and you have to own the consequences no matter what they are. And I think that it's a tough place as a coach, because, you know, you want to push people. And there are certain times where I do push people, and I'm like, hey, I think it'd be better to do this, you know, and why the show's in a few weeks. It has to make sense, you know, along the timeline. Okay, the show's in a few weeks. It's in this area. it's not really going to push us too much farther away from this. But if it's like somebody's already struggling and the next show is not for another 3 months, like probably not the best idea, and that's when we have to say, okay, we have to call it. And not only am I looking at that client's current season, I need to look at their future seasons. And the longer that we compete in one season, the longer that we're putting off the following one. Now, somebody's on a roll, they're doing good, we're going to push it because why not? Alternatively, that's not where we're at, you know what I mean? Like we kind of have to, just moderate that. So it can be hard as a coach. And one of the other things is that I think, hold on, I have such terrible handwriting. I really need to do a better job of this. I wrote I always write notes and then sometimes they're really good. I usually print them out for this reason.
Well, I have one thing to add to that though, is that what that can also happen.
So I decipher.
Yes, please take your time. But what can also happen with that, like for example, when I finished my season, my life was not in a good place. Like,
yes,
I was going through some
one of the main reasons.
But what I could have done, instead of saying like, hey, I need to step back and I need to get my life together, I could have used competing as a Band-Aid on a bullet hole and said, I'm not going to focus on this. I'm just going to keep competing because now I have laser focus. I have every day is from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed is packed. I can't think about what's going on over here. I can't worry about what's going on over here because I'm competing and I'm a competitor. And had I done that, I don't know where I would have been. And that can happen. That like competing can become somebody's entire everything.
And that was the next point, was that it can either serve as a distraction, which sometimes I do think that in certain particular situations it can be a useful distraction, because if everything else is falling apart around you, but this is keeping you a more centered person, that could be a good thing. But you could also take that in a really negative direction. So if you're using this as a distraction to your real problems, and because it's like you said, you can just sandwich your day, like it's just full. Okay, it's already booked up. I don't need to think about this other thing. I'm just going to avoid
because
what I need
this
to
is
handle.
My priority.
This is my everything. Or if this is the only thing that you have going on, that is where it becomes really, really dicey. And that is the worst situation. That's the worst type of outcome that I've seen as a coach. When somebody doesn't have anything else or much else going on in their life besides competing, and then they basically put their worth into the competitions and the placings, it becomes really, really hard for people to get out of that or to really see any other positives and other stuff. Taking time off. And this is not because, I want to take time off because I'm excited about competing. And I know that sounds really, it's really tough to distinguish, but I've gotten better at reading. Like I can read through, or when I talk to people, understand like their language and their, the way that they're saying things and why they're saying them. Somebody can be really excited to get on stage again and they want to compete for that reason. And then they can also be doing it because they're using it as a distraction because they have nothing else, right? Like they might look similar on paper, but they're very different when you talk to somebody and you really know your client. If you don't know your client, you're not going to know the difference. But if you actually know them, you'll be able to kind of distinguish that. So,
and as a competitor yourself, it's something to recognize in yourself, because the reality of competing is that like it will end at some point, whether that's an off season, whether that's your career's over. It will end, and if you have done nothing but push everything else in your life away for the sport, what are you left with in those off seasons? And then if you have nothing, what are you going to do? You're going to run right back to competing, and you can't be competitive if you don't have an off season. And so you're setting yourself up for long-term failure by continuing to, like you say, like run your face into a wall. And it's really tempting. And like I was there, like this January, like I could have easily been like, yeah, this fertility stuff is hard. I can't focus on this. Like, let's just do another show. But then where would I have been next year? Probably in a worse place than I was in January. Could have been. I don't know. But it will end. And where do you want to be when it's over?
Yeah, that's where it is important to not just completely distract yourself from all the other things in your life. Like I said, I think that for certain circumstances, this can actually be a welcome distraction, especially when there's things that are out of your control that you're dealing with. A job loss or something, has happened in your family or just whatever. It
could be a perspective thing too, there's a little to focus on.
Of course, like that sometimes I think is a welcome distraction. So I don't want to say that if you're distracting yourself with prep, it's a bad idea. No, of course it can be useful in some senses. But there are more times than not when people are, have glaring issues that they've maybe discovered amongst themselves, like we talked about that in the first podcast. Like when you're stripping away these things in your preps, like you're going to learn a lot about yourself, and you could learn something bad about yourself or many bad tendencies that you have, and that kind of is revealed to you. And if you're just running from those because prepping is easier, because dieting is easier, that's generally going to be the problem. Another issue, of course, is bad coaching, which we're not going to get too much into because this is not a hey trash coaches podcast, obviously. I don't want anybody to think there's like a conflict of interest, because clearly we're coaches. That's not what the point of this is. But just some things to be aware of. You already kind of touched on it a little bit. A coach pushing you to compete maybe when you shouldn't, or just for the sake of like having people at the show or anything like that. Like I could give a fuck less if I had clients competing at a show or not. Like if they are, that's amazing. If we can make a cool event out of it and more people come, awesome. If I can have multiple people at one show, that's convenient. That's nice. They all get to be together. I get to see them. It's great. I would never in a million years push somebody to do a show just because I want clients on stage. That is absolutely horrifying in my opinion to do as a coach, to run your business that way, but people do it, and so that's definitely one thing. And then obviously just bad practices in general. We've all heard the horror stories, but those still happen. They are still going on right now. People are still doing crash 12-week preps. People are still prescribing things they shouldn't be prescribing for clients. They still have no concept of, really any background on their client, any history with their client, any off season with them, and they don't really understand how to diet them, or especially what to do after.
There's not usually, but I would say a lot of the clients that I work with who have just competed like once or twice, there was no plan off. And I don't know what kind of fucking business model that is. Maybe it works for these people, but I couldn't think, like, you sell the dream to somebody, right? Like, you come to me, you've trained, you've done stuff, and you're like, I'm like, I could get you ready for a show in 12 weeks. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll do whatever it takes. And I'm like, all right, cool. Put you on shit meal plan, bunch of cardio, run your face into the ground, maybe put you on some drugs, and you probably look great, right? It's your first show prep, it's your first really aggressive time. Okay, cool. And then peace out, you don't hear from me because I don't know what to do afterwards. And then you are now like, well, that was cool what I looked like. Can I come back to that? And I'm like, yeah, sure. We do the same thing again, maybe a little more aggressive. Do that a few times. And now what happens? And that is where a lot of people are still stuck. I hope there are less coaches who are doing that. And I think that there are less coaches who are doing that. But there are still plenty of people who do go through that, unfortunately. And more importantly, we're now seeing the people who have gone through that reaching out to coaches who aren't doing that and saying, I need help. But understanding you had 3 horrifying seasons with this other coach, it's going to take some time.
It's not going to be like a cakewalk like it was the first few times.
And I mean, that leads us, I think, to another point too, is that the post-show period is hard. And if you had a terrible...
Just hit my glasses on the...
She agrees so hard.
I agree so hard, I'm going to headbutt the mic. Okay.
But it's so hard, and if you have a bad coach who's not there for you during that period, or doesn't have a plan for you during that period, or has a crap check-in process that isn't actually like caring about anything but your weight, like that's not going to be helpful. But I think we should touch on like the actual just post-show period in itself, because that is, for me, that was the hardest part of prep, the hardest part of competing.
Hands down, I would say that almost every client that I've ever coached has a harder time after a show than they do during prep. Prep is hard, but it's hard, but you have this big goal in your face, and you know you're working towards it, and you know you're excited about it.
And your body is changing in a leaner direction.
Yeah, and it's changing every day, and things are exciting, and you're looking forward to it. Even if you didn't love competing, you still probably had a good time. You know what I mean? There's still a good experience surrounding it. And then what ends up happening is, there's a few things, but one, you've put so much effort and time and just
focus
into one day, few hours, right? Like
few minutes,
let's be realistic, but the whole day, like the whole weekend, right? You put so much time and focus into this weekend. And then when it's done, what are you left with? You have such a crash. You know, it's like you ever hear about like people in the Olympics, like they like literally get depressed afterwards, and obviously you've been working towards one fucking thing for 4 years, you know what I mean? And then it's over. Like, that's normal, you know what I mean? And that happens, I think, with, you know, a lot of athletes when, again, they're kind of transitioning out, but just on focusing on just one event, like you've worked so hard towards this and now it's over. It's like, well, now I feel this like emptiness. And that emptiness is often what I find triggers people to go to these bad behaviors. And this is coupled with, which is why I think bodybuilding is so unique, it's coupled with the fact that you've gotten so lean, you've lost typically so much weight and so much body fat. If you are natural, you're going to have a completely skewed hormone panel. Even if you aren't natural and you're a female, you're going to have a skewed hormone panel. The people who fare the best are enhanced males, because they are pretty much replacing the hormones that they're losing. So they're leaner, but they're much more stable. And the person who fares the worst is the natural female. You know what I mean? Because there's just going to be a lot of hormonal changes. You know, thyroid, sex hormones, cortisol, the whole deal. And on top of this, now you metabolically are downregulated. You know what I mean? Your metabolism's a little bit slower. Your hunger is fucking through the roof. And your hunger was through the roof before, but you didn't care because you had the show day. It wasn't an option. You told yourself, you know, even if you maybe had a few slip-ups on prep here and there, you pretty much had a no options mentality going into your prep. Now, who the fuck is gonna stop you? What's stopping you? Nothing. And then couple those physiological changes with the mindset afterwards, and just like the mental kind of just strain of competing. Maybe you placed well, and now you're going, oh God, well, I have to do good again. Right? I won this show. I want to get third next time, or last next time. That's embarrassing, right? So you have that in your head. And then also, if you did bad, then you go, well, I'm a piece of shit, and nobody thought I was good enough on that day. So no matter how you place, it generally, like your mindset is going to be kind of skewed. And it's going to be skewed, again, because hormonally and, you know, metabolically where you're at. And then also, just like the show is over. Like, everything comes together all at once, and it literally feels like every day is like this really big up and down.
And it's there's so much gray area that you didn't have before, and so you a lot of that back and forth conversation of like, well, I'm not dieting, but I know I need to stay within this window, but I know I need to be eating more, and I know I need to be gaining weight, but I don't want to gain too much weight, and oh my God, my body's changed. Because when you're so lean, every pound, every half pound of fat that you gain can feel like a lot. And especially when you have that distorted view of what good looks like now, because you just saw yourself in a position that you'll never be at naturally ever again. Like when you've peaked and you've stepped on stage with your tan on and everything, like you're not gonna look like that until the next time you peak and you step on stage. Like, it's just not gonna happen. But
that's more importantly, it's not even how you look, it's how you feel. So you could show me, maybe not me, but maybe somebody else who isn't as skilled with this, like here's a picture of me the day before I competed, and here's me 10 pounds after, and that person's gonna be like, you look the same, but you feel completely different, because you know what it feels like to not have anything when you sit down. You know what it feels like to, you know, have your arms feel a certain way. And what is also weird about all this is when you are adding fat back, I don't care how it comes back, like how slowly it comes back, it always comes back weird. Especially in the beginning. Fat, just when you're so lean, I swear to God, you just wake up and it's like somebody just like threw paint on you, like, oh, here's some fat cells. And like they just kind of like sprinkled around your body, and you're like, hey, why did it show up here? Like, it just doesn't sit well. And you could literally be the same weight in a month and look just better. It's very weird how it kind of sets. So the first few months after a show, I always try to tell people, like, listen, it's gonna be a little rough, especially if you're really lean. I would say that the best ways to combat that, because I don't want to like just end on a super negative emo kind of feels, I would say that the two things. One, accepting that that afterwards is going to be hard is really important. I think if you go into it going, this is gonna be the best time I do,
It's not gonna happen to
Fuck
me.
off.
It's not gonna happen to me.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen. You're gonna have a hard time after your show.
In some way.
I don't care who you are, something is going to struggle. 99% of people struggle. So if you accept it and go, it's just like when you accept that prep is hard and there's gonna be hard days, it makes it easier. If you accept, you know what, afterwards, things are gonna be a little rocky. I might not be perfect. I'm gonna try my fucking damnedest, but there's gonna be some ups and downs. It makes it a little better. So accepting that this part is just natural is okay. That's number one. And then number two, laying the right foundation before you prep is key. And the best preps that we have with clients are when clients have, they've built up their food, they can have untracked days, untracked meals, they feel pretty regulated with their intake and their hunger, and the hormones are in check. Like, all these things are pretty stable, so that when you don't develop good habits when you're dieting, you just don't. You're kind of maintaining the habits that you have. So if we can start in a really good place, we're going to at least end up in the least shitty place possible. Still might not be a great place, but it's going to be better than what it would be if you were starting in a rocky position. And
you have something that you're looking to get back to, as opposed to if you start in a bad place, then it's almost like, but this felt so good. Like, it felt so good to be so lean. Like, why would I want to go back to the way I felt before? And that's where, again, that the cycle of continuing to compete can happen, because you start to gain fat again. This is uncomfortable. I don't want to do it, and whatever. But I think you nailed it with accepting it, first of all, and I think also like having the resources to help you through those things. Like having a coach that you feel comfortable saying, like, "Hey, I know that I might sound crazy right now, but I'm 2 weeks post show and I feel awful." And it's like, okay, like, let's talk about it. What's going on? Why do you feel that way? And let's now talk through that and get you on the other side, because you can really easily bask in those feelings and just say, yeah, I know this is gonna be hard, so I'm just gonna go through this, and it's gonna be hard. Or you can say, this is gonna be hard, but I made it through prep, I'm gonna make it through this. And then, but that's not gonna happen on your own. It's not gonna happen without some kind of plan, with some kind of support.
Yeah, and I know that obviously, again, when we talked in the beginning about the cost and all this thing, you have to factor in having a coach, and this is not just to be a plug for coaching for us or anything, but having a coach after a show is really, really important. And that is, we cannot stress enough clearly the after effects of competing and how detrimental they can be, and how dark of a place that can be. And that's also where it's important to, if you know that you are maybe getting to a really dark place, or you've been there before, maybe having a therapist in your corner is going to be necessary. Not everybody obviously needs that, but some people are going to, especially if they run into some disordered eating, and just some really negative thought behaviors and patterns, because that can be really hard to break. And the way to break it, again, is not to compete because you hate yourself. If you start a prep because you hate yourself, it's only going to get worse, and those feelings are going to compound every single time that you prep. So I think that we didn't want this to be super negative and super dark. I mean, that's, you guys know this I am, but we wanted it to be realistic and useful, so that you could look at both sides of it. Okay, here are some of the reasons why you should compete. Here are also some of the things that you have to consider that are going to happen. It doesn't make them bad. It's not bad, and that's where, a lot of people a few years ago came out with like, competing caused all my problems, or I'm blaming competing for this, and it's like, no, that's not it. That is just, the reality is, if you're doing this sport, there are certain things you have to accept going into it. There's going to be hormonal changes, there's going to be metabolic changes, there's going to be mental changes. If you're not ready for that, your shit's gonna get rocked. But if you prepare yourself for that, and you have a good team in your corner, and you've laid the right foundation before your prep, and you did it for the right reasons, you're gonna come out of it a lot better. And it can be really successful, and you can do that for years.
And competing can make you a better person, in the sense that it can change your mindset. But competing's not gonna solve your problems. Competing's not gonna improve your physique for the rest of your life. Like if you're thinking that this is how I wanna get abs, like this is not how you're gonna get abs to maintain abs. But there are still so many benefits that can come out of it if you have the right motivations, you have the right team behind you. But it's like we said at the beginning, like these are things that you need to be ready for, because a lot of them are inevitable, but it's just part of it. And it can make you better. It can make you better, it can make you worse, but as long as you're going about it the right way, and again, have that support system, I think that it's not, like you said, it's not competing swell. Competing is dope, but when done right.
Yes, you have to be prepared and aware of just everything on both sides of it. So there is a dark side to everything, so you just have to know it. And luckily, we've both been through it, and we've coached many, many people through it. So this is the most realistic information that we could give from our experiences as competitors and coaches. So as always, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it. And if you want to listen to any of the other podcasts, read any articles, apply for coaching, or just reach out to us, you can go to teamlocofit.com. And we'll catch you next week.
Bye.